Look, listen, I'm going to abuse my platform on here for literally no reason right now. I am envisioning this thing, and there is no way it's feasible. This isn't even like a question of hypotheticals. I know for a fact that this is not feasible. 99%, I am sure. And also, the idea itself is completely pointless. Like, there's no benefit to humanity in any way, shape, or form. I just think it's cool. Emphasis there being on the I think it's cool. But it's November. I'm writing myself to death, and my brain is fried. So this is the content you get as a result of that. It all began with my always present fascination with the very concept of the aquarium. You have this habitat, this community of creatures within this ideally well-tended box of glass. It's kind of like a pressurized underwater city or base for humans, which incidentally I have always been fascinated with as well, but in reverse. And it's surrounded by this medium that is utterly hostile to its inhabitants, you know, air. I do often look at like containers, glasses of water, and I see like, this water is trying to spill. Gravity is trying to pull it down and like make it flat. But there's a matter in the way that's blocking that from happening, and the integrity of that glass is stronger than the force of gravity that's pulling on it. Isn't that amazing? Anyway, the point is, I think aquariums are cool. I don't think I will ever own one myself, because it's just way too much work that I have to do way too regularly, and I really would want to have the fish to have a good environment to exist in. But I love looking at them and at the huge range of aesthetic choices that you can make. Aquatic ecosystems in and of themselves are immensely diverse. You can do a lot of very cool, interesting things with them, but you can also have all manner of like structures in your aquarium, various plants, lighting, the sand color. You can have a lot of like dials to turn. Especially now in the age of 3D printers, you could do Mars-themed aquariums, you could do Cthulhu-themed aquariums, you could do Elven Fantasy City-themed aquariums. And there are, of course, a bunch of classic elements that a lot of people have in their aquariums, like ruined castles or Buddhas. Most aquariums just kind of look like they're, you know, underwater. There's rocks, there's sticks, there's plants, maybe there's a guy in a diving bell or like a mini shipwreck. Why would you try to do an underwater themed aquarium? That's just an aquarium. You have all of the fascinating options at your disposal, so many things that you could do, and you go for the water-flavored soda to drink? As I've continued considering this over the years, the very concept of the aquarium has become more and more abstracted. What if you didn't even put fish and water in there? I'm not talking about like terrariums for spiders and lizards. I'm talking about putting weird atmospheric compositions or liquid compositions, colorful gases, alien living environments. Because fish, there's a lot of those. I like fish, I have nothing against fish. But there's a lot of more things living within the collective imagination of humankind. And or, you know, the dreams of machines and the unstoppable forces of evolution. I often find anything that isn't limitless extremely constraining. Only over years of gaining more and more wisdom in this field have I gained an understanding that experiential specificity is probably the ideal way of experiencing this limitlessness. A sort of orgasmic collapse of possibility into sublime and unique definition. Anyway, I want a sort of ecosystem simulator where I can set the parameters, and I need those parameters to be things that maybe even are impossible in the real world. Doesn't need to be 100% realistic, so long as it looks cool. Kind of a little bit like Spore, but also very different. I think it would scratch the same itch for a lot of people. It would most certainly have to include the same level, if not significantly more powerful design tools. And it needs to exist on like a modal sliding scale of me being able to focus on just making an aesthetically cool ecosystem that looks good, because it looks good, to a place where I can maybe even just have completely random parameters and it's just evolution and we see where it goes. So it's important to be able to combine these things to sort of reflect a more organic, creative process. Because many properties of that are inherently emergent. Because I want to be able to play around with basically just having an apex predator that is legitimately unkillable, and I want to see how the ecosystem adapts to that. I want to have dense asteroid fields in space to see how life adapts to existing in the hard vacuum. I want to have a rainforest where rain falls upwards. I want to just give creatures the ability to breathe ice. And I want to take a snapshot of that at any moment and instantly turn it, well, it doesn't have to be instantly, but like, you know, in a reasonable time frame, turn it into a cool aquarium that looks good. I want to be able to pluck life forms from there and share them with other enthusiasts over vast online libraries of artificial life. And I am very much aware that sort of rough sketches of possible potential eventual approximations of this idea do already exist in our world today. Games like The Sapling and Ecosystem, they are fun and interesting. They try to emulate some aspects of this, and I like that they exist. I think they're fun, but they are nowhere near what I am envisioning, especially when it comes to the aesthetic department. I think of these things as being visually stunning and interesting and fascinating and mesmerizing, you know, like an actual real aquarium that you would have standing in your living room. And frankly, none of those simulation games are remotely there. Spore also never was, with its like almost comic book aesthetic, because it's not their purpose. Their main purpose is to be like fun, gamey evolution simulators, and they do that well. And I think that this level of, I wouldn't even say quality, of specificity, of sophistication that I expect would require a pretty large team of experts with a lot of money and development time. And that's just not something you're going to be able to drum up for such a niche product, I reckon. That's not really even the thing that's impossible about this. This is just extremely unfeasible. With the current advances in machine learning and like a different economic system, perhaps, but I'm not gonna hold my breath for that. Ideally, all of this would be like open source as well, so you'd have a lot of people just customizing it to their experience, and, you know, it being open and people being able to do things with it. Imagine open source Spore where people could actually legitimately add their own parts and there was just a integrated part of the design. But really the thing that I think is impossible on a technical level is also the coolest, it's probably not the coolest thing about all this. It's the sort of catalyst that makes the rest of it so much cooler. I want all this as an actual, for real aquarium. You know, one that you could put in your house, like a glass box that has things inside it. Now, I do also think that it would be very cool to have this on a screen. However, and this is my problem, I feel like if we're gonna do this, we have to do it right. And the thing you don't have on a screen is depth perception. It's not like a window where you can, you know, as you move around from side to side, even forward and backward, the arrangement of the things on the screen shifts. Which is why I find the idea that screens might one day replace windows rather preposterous, even though I would love to be able to like flick a switch and like feel as though I was living in an underwater coral reef type home. That would fucking rock. Screens send out the same pattern of light in all directions, or rather, you know, the front, but there's also, it's not just the front, because if it was just the front, you wouldn't be able to see the screen the second you're no longer like staring right at it. It also goes a little bit to the sides. There's a little bit of a cone situation going on. There's no diffusion or scattering happening behind the screen. And I don't think that's ever going to be possible, although, and I cannot stress this enough, I have not looked into this at all. Because the only way that I can envision this working is that basically, instead of having like the regular thing, the diodes that you shoot light out of in the directions, you'd need a sort of type of light-emitting device that can manipulate very precisely individual rays of light, essentially, so it would send out different ones depending on the angle, and so you could basically utilize it as a window, because the light that would be hitting your eyes if you were standing in front would be different from the light that would be hitting your eyes if you were standing, say, over here. And not only am I pretty sure that that's not how light works, you're also dealing with an enormous degree of uncertainty, because you're working at a very small quantum scale here. Come to think of it, if we ever were to be able to manipulate manipulate individual photons, which there's a big asterisk around that, because that's just a shorthand term in physics, that would have much more massive implications for the hyper-miniaturization of computing systems. The screen thing would be a complete afterthought, even though perhaps it would be the thing that is most visible. See what I did there? That was barely even a pun. That wasn't even a joke. That was just a thing I said. Like, if you could actually legitimately effectively use photons instead of electrons in switches for everything. And this, I am really reasonably certain, cannot be done, though I would once again like to stress that I know absolutely nothing about this. I have not looked into it. This is just the understanding that I have of the physics of the situation. But, however, if instead of having to do it on like a flat surface, you would instead do it in like a box that's a enclosed, hermetically sealed system. You could put whatever you needed inside of that box to make it be a simulation of an actual, for real aquarium. Would that make it possible? I don't know. I have no idea. Literally, I do not know anything about this, but it kind of feels like it might make it possible. And you could still have a sort of window environment in that, because you could probably switch between various different virtual environments. Because a window is much more crucially something that helps you see into a different world than the world that is the one that you're standing in. Unless you just have a window that is, you know, that is in the same room or unroom, the outside type area as you. And that world is bigger than the enclosure of that window. So what is in the box could also just be a slice, or rather a chunk, of a greater whole. One of my favorite video game ideas that I have, which I will of course never pursue in any way, shape or form, because that's just not what I do. I have other creative pursuits. I just can't stop the ideas from coming. Was a sort of Zoo Tycoon type game where instead of having regular animals, you have supernatural creatures instead. You know, like Bigfoot and bar guests and mermaids. But because we'd be doing magic anyway, I figured we could have enclosures that are actually bigger than they appear, and have sort of additional slices enfolded within a fourth spatial dimension. So that feral were-hyena could actually feel as though it was on the African steppe, and we'd have a whole additional land management layer. Anyway, that's what I would envision as an option here. I also feel like having it be an enclosed ecosystem with no interaction in a hypothetical, like, virtual outside. That's also very cool. I'm just saying it wouldn't be beyond the horizon of possibility. And frankly, actually, if you get these boxes big enough, you could probably make like an expo, like a sort of aquarium. You could make a supernatural zoo like this IRL. You just have to come up with the fictional animated creatures. If you had displays like this, you could put whatever you wanted in there. You could put stellar nebulae that like do cool star nebulae stuff, with or without an additional ecosystem. You know how they put like wallpaper, especially in older aquariums? I don't think that's trendy anymore, but I used to see it in when I was a kid a lot in aquariums, that like would be like a sea landscape of underwater places. As a child, I often wondered if the fish living in that aquarium were fooled by this illusion, or if they thought about it at all. Or if they were in a sort of in-between state where they were immensely frustrated by an awareness of the fact that the land they could see beyond the limited enclosure of their tank, this limitless expanse of a natural world they had probably never experienced in their own life, was forever beyond their reach on account of them being real and it being imaginary. It is inherently a space not accessible to existing real things. I have often felt like that fish, staring at the wallpaper of its tank, longing to explore the imaginary wilds beyond. Forever bound and bounded by the circumstance that my very existence as a continuous entity is predicated upon my being real and not imaginary. This is how I think about the worlds inside of my own mind. Anyway, with my plan, you wouldn't be exposing your mutated, hyper-intelligent fish to this kind of existential question, because not only would it have a limitless enclosure, it would also be imaginary. It would be a virtual construct. Yes, I guess it wouldn't be entirely imaginary because it would exist in some way physically, but that's really just a manifestation, and it's a lot closer to being truly imaginary in the type of potential you have access to, as opposed to the you know, this. And another minor factor why I think this would be pretty impossible is because I envision a lot of people engaging in this. I feel like a similar number to aquarium enthusiasts would be this thing enthusiasts that have this thing in their homes. Talking online and going to each other's houses, exchanging the creature cards and genes and environments and props that they've come up with. Look, don't at me. I told you this video was gonna be stupid. I said so at the beginning. It's your own fault if you're still here. NaNoWriMo will be over soon, then I can focus more on the making of the videos. I have a pretty thick and juicy political video lined up. I might also get into werewolf lore, or perhaps the Wraith one. I'm not sure as of this time. Might do a video on the technocracy also. It's up to me. For the time being, that is it from me. I have 2 jobs that I really love doing, but I hate that I have to do both of them. Or rather that I love doing both of them. Thank you for watching this video. Like, comment, subscribe, share this to whatever this is relevant to. Share it to my Discord server, I guess. You consider buying some of my merchandise or my short story collection, supporting me on Patreon or Subscribestar. And in that spirit, penis. And see you around, cunts.